Personal computers are very forgiving in terms of how you orient the components. Today's modular computer components allow for easy adaptation to both design and style. Right now, we're going to be looking at how I built my very own wall-mounted PC. So welcome to the Austin Custom Computer Cases build log number 1. Before I begin talking about the process, let me just show you what I was housing my computer in before. Here we have the very elegant Intermax iVector mid-tower ATX case that I obtained from Fry's Electronics. The case has a smooth back, soft touch finish that complements anyone handling the case, and the wide acrylic side window allows for an expanded view for seeing inside. And the uncentered design of the top and front of the case catches the eye with its LED fans that glow behind the perforated metal. Unfortunately, as most cases are, you cannot see all the components in full view, which for me, I do not enjoy. Most people, including me, who custom build their PCs want to show off their fancy of-the-day components. So having a view to the internals is a necessity for any case that I decide to acquire. This is the reason why I decided to do this build. The first and most obvious thing I did for this build was to design it. Using Google SketchUp Pro, I was able to make a rough render of what the case would turn out like and be able to map the dimensions for the component holes. Though the final product was a bit different than the render made it out to be, but you'll see that in the final result at the end. Once I designed and measured out the entire build in the SketchUp rendering software, it was time to order the materials for the build. I ordered 2 PCIe 16X risers for the graphics card, 2 PCIe 1X risers for the sound card, 1 power switch I/O, 5 2-foot right-angle SATA data cables for the hard drives and SSDs, 3 SATA power extension cables for some of the hard drives, 1 computer screws kit for motherboard risers and screw heads, 1 10-pack of small hinges for the case, 1 set of CPU power extension cables, an EVGA backplate for the graphics card, and a 5 square foot roll of carbon fiber vinyl wrap for the front and sides finish. Then I bought a 4x8 foot sheet of 3/8 thick plywood and 2 brass case latches. Before I begin doing the physical building of the case, I wanted to be sure that the PCIe risers worked correctly, because for one thing, I've been told that all PCI risers are not good for gaming and editing rigs, and another thing being that the entire design of the case depends on the risers working correctly. So I began by dry fitting each riser into the graphics card and motherboard. At first it was working, but then after doing some more tests, one including connecting 2 risers together, the computer began to power cycle and not boot up. I read up on some tech forums about using PCIe risers, and people were shielding the cable using either tinfoil or aluminum tape. We ran out of aluminum tape, so I decided to use the tinfoil idea. So I wrapped tinfoil around the cables and tested one. The computer booted up, but the game performance was awful. On average, running Grand Theft Auto 5 would clock around 90 FPS on ultra graphics, but using the riser cable, the game was stuck at 11 FPS at the same settings. So I decided to scrap the riser usage, which meant that I had to redesign the case. After another hour of redoing the entire build render, I finally got the design I wanted. Only this time, instead of the graphics and sound cards getting their own cutouts, they just sit on the motherboard like normal. This was actually good because it shrunk the length down by 2.5 feet, thus making it more space friendly. So after I finalized the design and measurements of the new render, it was time to build it for real. First, I began with cutting out the main bulk pieces of plywood that the case would be made out of, cutting out the front and back panels and the siding using a circular saw. Next, I referenced the measurements on the rendered model and drew the front panel cutouts where I would be mounting the components into. Then cut them all out using a hand scroll saw. That took about 30 minutes to cut each hole. After cutting, I went back into each hole and filed away the rough edging using sandpaper and files. Since I used a relatively thin sheet of plywood, after cutting out the front panel I noticed the horizontal strength wasn't appealing, so I had to put some slim support sticks, which I then glued and screwed into the inside of the front panel, which later actually got in the way with some of the component mounting brackets. Thus I had to snap off 2 of them and cut indents in the others. Next, I cut to spec the top and bottom siding and the back panel and angle cut the left and right siding, which all came together perfectly. Though, before putting it together, I also cut out the holes for the main bus line hole at the bottom, the LED stripping pass-through holes on the sides, the wall mounting holes on the back panel, and the vent holes at the top. Once that was done, I attached the siding to the back panel and screwed and glued it in. Adding wood filler, I filled the imperfections in the wood and set it aside to dry. Then I cut the vent covers out using a sheet of perforated aluminum sheeting that my dad had on hand and set those aside. Once the wood filler and glue dried on what is now called the bowl of the case, which is the back panel and the siding, I went ahead and completed my sanding of every piece, making sure to sand down the dried wood filler, leveling the overlays of the wood, and the edging of the bowl. Once that was completed, my friend Andrew, who assisted me in the build, painted the inside white with an interior latex paint. When the paint was dry, it was time to make the mounting brackets for the components. We had to individually place each component into each designated cutout and mark where the brackets would go. It took about 2 hours to make every bracket, just because each one had a unique measurement and screw hole size. When all of this work was completed, it was time to put the carbon fiber wrap on the outside. Andrew and I did this by stretching it across the surface, patting it down, and using staples to secure it, just like stretching canvas for a painting. Once that was covered with the wrap, I cut out the holes in the wrap for everything and finally put the finishing hardware onto the case, which included the hinges, latches, and vent covers. Finally, I was done with building the case. Now it was time to install the components, wire up everything, and hang it on the wall. Next, it was time to screw the components into the mounts. Since I specifically measured my motherboard for the mounting brackets, this case is now classified as an ATX compatible case. I went ahead and ran the LED stripping all around the inside of the case and on the left and right sides, using the pre-cut holes to run the LED through. Then I mounted the LED controller on the inside and ran the IR cable to the outside on the bottom. Once I mounted the components, it was time for the ever so fun cable running and management. This case actually made it pretty easy to run and manage computer cables because everything runs under the components with no interference of holes or small spaces. Finalizing the cable running, I zip tied all the cables in a good enough fashion, and now it was time to put it on the wall. Since I have a fairly decorative soundproofing panel set up in my computer desk area, I had to cut some of the panels in order to make it blend nicely with the design. So I accomplished that and measured where my screw holes would be for the hanging screws. I pre-drilled the holes and screwed in the semi-thick hanging screws. My wall was made using concrete board instead of sheetrock, so I didn't need to use drywall anchors to attach my hanging screws to. Then all that was left was to slide the case onto the wall, and that's exactly what I did. Now all that was left was to redo my entire desk space. The monitors had to go back onto the mount. I had to move the monitor arm stand over so that it became centered with the case. I had to run all of the I/O from the monitors and the human interface devices and the surround system from the bottom of the case to the designated plug-in areas. Then I did a bit of cable managing, making the bus line neat, and just fixed up the working space so that it looked great, and that was it. So after all of that, the case in my work area was completed. The project took about 4 days total just to build everything, get all the packages in. Fortunately, Amazon is good about their one-day shipping, and just making it look great was half the work. So just to give you an overview on the technical side of this build, my computer rig consists of an Intel Xeon E3 1231V3 quad-core 8-thread processor running at 3.8 GHz overclocked, a Gigabyte Z97X SLI ATX LGA 1150 motherboard, an EVGA GeForce GTX 970 graphics card, 32 gigs of EVGA overclockable DDR3 RAM, two 120GB SanDisk SSDs in RAID 0 for the boot partition, 12 terabytes of expanded hard drive storage, a Creative Sound Blaster Audigy FX sound card, a NZXT Century 3 touchscreen fan controller, 4 standard blue LED 140mm case fans, all running off of an EVGA Supernova 750 watt 80 plus bronze fully modular power supply. As for the workstation, it consists of 4 Dell and Acer 24-inch 1080p LED monitors, with the top 3 configured in NVIDIA Surround for a resolution of 5760 by 1080p and the bottom monitor being separate at standard 1080p. A Logitech Z506 5.1 75 watt RMS power surround sound speaker system, a CM Storm Devastator green LED backlit keyboard, a Logitech G402 Hyperion Fury mouse that can run up to 4000 DPI and has a 1 millisecond report rate, a Razer Firefly RGB LED underlit mousepad, a Logitech G13 programmable game board, an Audio-Technica cardioid USB condenser microphone, and custom-made soundproofing panels that span across the wall to complement it all. This definitely was a great first official case build. I enjoyed the time spent making it. So far, the only problem I've seen with it has been that the carbon fiber wrap, being that it has a weaker adhesive, has been lifting in a couple of spots, but nothing can be perfect. Though this was so much better than the first attempt I made at making a custom case, but I'm not going to talk about that failure. So I hope that you have enjoyed this build log. A fair amount of time went into filming and making it, so if you have liked it, please share it with your friends and family, or just PC enthusiasts if you happen to know any. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next build.